All right, so come join me to go do laundry because I feel as though communication is best had, or talks are best had when someone is doing chores. I would always do chores with my little siblings, and we would always talk the most when we were doing it. So let's talk about communication in the movie White Chicks that was made in 2004. So, what is communication? It is the transmission of concepts and meanings between people. This can include anything inside or an organization or just everyday communication. Um, we are going to focus on the failures of the Copeland brothers to communicate. And so this involved a lot of noise and also a lot of confirmation bias that allowed them to not really care about the noise that was happening. And then in the end, their performance of roles through their communicative behavior. And so, what were their roles? The roles were to become affluent, high society white women, the Wilson brothers, at the Hamptons. And so, they had to do a lot of adjusting in the way that they talked as two men who were African American. And so, in the beginning, they had to focus on the words they said and also the subtle way they laughed. Their laugh changed from more masculine to it had to change to a and so, with that, there were also some nonverbal ways that they had to act, or the way that they had to show the emotions on their face. Um, so, starting off with their general posture, the Copeland brothers maintained more of a masculine walk or a gait, and they tended to be stronger than what was expected out of them as the Wilson sisters, because strength in the Hamptons wasn't considered like a very feminine trait. And we'll get to confirmation bias in a second. How nobody was like, "Well, what's up?" Anywho, uh, there were also emotional difference in the little societal fights that were had when the Wilson sisters, aka the Copeland brothers, fought against the group that was behind Vanessa. There were social issues with that, and then also they had to sit in a very dirty place inside the Hamptons during their first dinner event, and it was sort of a consequence for being not socially correct towards the owner in the way that Vanessa saw fit. And so with that, the brothers had a smaller reaction to that social fight and the social consequence, whereas the three women that were with them thought it might be the end of the world and the end of their social influence and status. So, with that, we can look at kind of like these struggles. Some people might be asking, hey, why was nobody suspicious when a Wilson sister grew about a foot in the air and also like was tossing around two grown men? And so there's this thing called confirmation bias. It happens between any group as long as you make an assumption about them beforehand, internally or like externally about an assumption about them, and then whether or not it's a deep assumption, like an involuntary one, or whether it's some that you just choose to make about something or about someone. So, this is what is confirmation bias? It's kind of just sweeping something under the rug that doesn't match your profile for a person. And so, when there were differences in the talking styles that the Copeland brothers had between who they were and the way they were supposed to act as the Wilson sisters, it created friction that the other three girls noticed, but as I said, swept under the rug. This caused for a need for adaptation from the Copeland brothers because they had to make sure that they wouldn't be caught, and so they started to act more feminine and try to become more of what was expected of them. And so there was this study that looked at gender and racial bias issues in a commercial tone of voice analysis system. And that's linked below. But it basically showed that there were communication biases in a software towards those that were black or female, just because they were not thought of as talking normal. And so when the machine registered it, it either registered it as wrong like negative, or wrong as in just it didn't like notice it, but it was like confused. And so that is what can happen with perception bias. The confirmation bias is the second option, where something gets confused and then it's just swept under the rug. And so with that, we can look at how this affects the like OB world or managerial world. And so we can look at training people to understand the different cultures inside of the workplace so that there is a better flow. There is this video of a TED Talk that was recorded, and it is of Ricardo Fernandez talking about how he was managing cross-cultural remote teams, and that training greatly improved any issues that happened with international communication, and how that promoted a lot of workspace productivity just because barriers and noise were down, and so communication was better. So anyways, thank you for joining me in Getting Laundry. Come back to my channel.